What's up, everyone? Last time we conducted a challenge where the goal of remaining 10 subjects was to get the largest number of gym badges from each other. We had planned the usual elimination afterwards, but then careless Senslash chose to leave our guest. It's rather sad to see someone who was even in the finalists to make their leave, but that only proves another important point. You can't be the perfect specimen if you don't put some efforts in this. And we did see some good efforts from at least half of you. Several of you managed to earn at least 2 badges. Unfortunately, due to a low number of badges earned overall, there won't be an MVP with Star Award. Instead, those few badges that you still have can help you get in a small head start to the next challenge. And I need to remind you that the 3 subjects will be eliminated by the time the challenge ends. But of course, before we announce our next challenge in the earnest, let's check out our next featured story. Log Report 8.
The sound of knocking gently pattered at the door. In response he glued his sunken, fatigued eyes to the same hypnotizing, blue screen and kept scrolling page after page on the computer before him. If the seismitoad wasn't already blue, then the light surely made him even more so. Faintly, an electric fan hummed in the background, on a shelf full of uniformed folders and important, and probably incredibly secret documents. His office wasn't what he would call fancy or even poor to say the least, but described as a short, quaint room which braced many impacts against the elements, which would have otherwise been proven by the sheer amount of times the fluorescent tubes hanging on the ceiling have fallen out and replaced again over and over, or the office door and how many times its hinges have been replaced. However, through all of that chaos, the room still stood, and the Pokemon behind the screen still worked, and scrolled and scrolled and scrolled. His cursor steadily halted to a stop. A flurry of words of a lengthy document unraveled past the screen. It was coded yellow, but also in bold as urgent. That'll definitely be fun to read. Impatient banging on the door was what interrupted his reading this time. The seismitoad shot up from his desk, and adjusted his ivory-colored lab coat. He passed by old photographs of a delighted, younger self and his family all those years ago. His youngest son was studying in university now, while his eldest daughter, a mother of a family. The professor sighed. Was he really living his best life?
I'm here!
Croaked the toad, as he rushed to open the door. A Seviper with a cocked head and bothered look appeared on the other side.
I'm certain you've already read through the report I sent this morning, right, Professor Matsuar?
Oh, most certain, and oh so predictable. It was a clear sign that the message was Assistant Sevprida's. A few spelling errors, though it looked like more this time, labeled as urgent. For some reason or another, and the fact that it was sent at 5 in the morning. The fact that she came to knock on the door and wait for a couple minutes before knocking again was also a very clear sign that she would be coming to see him.
Yes, I think so.
Mudsworth obviously lied. He'd barely got a 4th read.
Lovely. I assume you want to head there now. I don't think we'll be missing anything. Righty, let's head there now.
The professor and his assistant speed walked, or speed slithered, down the black-tiled concrete-walled corridor. They maintained a constant, marching pace, as they always have for the past few years on their duty. Sevprida slithered a little ahead than the professor, as if she had been late to a crucial meeting, which she'd always done. Mudsworth, on the other hand, lagged behind, striding along like a janky, rusty robot. It was a hard, tiresome job, physically and mentally straining, yet the sanity and dedication of many Pokemon's minds were held together with the fewest strands of determination. This was no different for Professor Mudsworth, the man who spent over 3 decades of life devoting his life in the name of scientific research. He may not know where exactly all his research will lead him to, but he aims for the excellence that will be brought to Pokemonkind, aka that goal set out by the government that half expects Mudsworth's team to fulfill. Time gave the Seismitoad wrinkles and a not-so-athletic bod. He endured entire days sleep-deprived and dizzy. Time tried to tear down his sanity, yet his sheer will stalled its invaders, like how an iron bunker refused to let zombies through. It was also after all this time that the spotting of unidentified creatures became more frequent in the last month. The capture of one of these unidentified creatures was a noteworthy experience, as it would have been close to impossible to capture one if it was in a horde. Luckily, the captured specimen, which now resides somewhere in the depths of the lab, has given the research team a decent amount of information about the species. No one for sure knows what kind of threat these friggin' creatures can pose, as further testing can only tell. For one, they're about a meter tall or so, and for two are theorized to cooperate well in groups, therefore earning the nickname Codename Symbiont. Mudsworth felt a small shiver that creeped down his spine. He feared as if he failed to do a basic task, and that karma was coming after him in the next minute or so. His assistant has seen worse days than this, but he was wondering why she looked so pale lately. Sevprida was one to overreact in situations such as this one, and became ever so relieved once she learned that it wasn't so big of an issue after all, but now it seemed as if something had been pulling her sanity strings a little too intensely.
Have you been doing well, April? You don't look or sound your best day.
Don't worry about it. I'm handling just fine.
To him, it did not sound genuine. He caught her voice hesitating to answer as well, something he wasn't used to hearing as a response from her in the last few years.
Well, if you ever need to talk to anyone about it, I'm never gonna not listen. You know it already, right?
He knew his clients well. April Sevprida never bottled her emotions in front of others like that. Even she would know. Came the hollow-sounding reply. Mudsworth lingered over the idea of her speech patterns today. He was genuinely worried. After trekking along the halls, the two finally made it to the place they needed to be. The walls from this point on were made of heavy-duty, black concrete, while the tiled floor transitioned to a light gray concrete. To their left was a small control room, for adjusting lights, doors and other equipment within the area. Directly ahead was a pair of formidable metal frame doors which guarded the entrance to CN Symbiont's cell. Strangely, a strong, questionable, foul smell emitted through the hallway. The Sevper slowed to a halt, and glanced around for any clues. There were clearly none, and unusually enough there were no bodyguards encountered in the hallways. Which was also something the head professor was not too happy to learn about. Sevprida frantically zoomed and proceeded to open the control room with her card pass. The sliding door opened, and the smell reeked stronger than ever. Mudsworth rushed over to the scene. The two of them were tremendously shocked at what waited on the other side. A dead, corroding body of an Octary slumped towards the control pad greeted them. Beaten red arms splayed out on levers and buttons, as their bruised head lolled to the side with a visible bitten bruise mark right on their skull. Their lab coat was corroded with some kind of substance which still dripped a pool of violet death under their chair. The scientists scouted the surroundings of the newly formed graveyard. Corroded papers were thrown all over the floor, while collapsed wires hung from the broken ceiling panels. If his theory was true, Then that white tentacled freak must have crawled and attempted an escape through the ceiling and possibly reached the vent system from there.
What about in the actual cell?
April began breathing heavier. Her eyes looked as if they were on the verge of closing.
You're right. Let's do that now. And quickly,
replied the seismitoad, with a clouded mind. He didn't know how to feel, yet he braced for the worst. It was his job. The seismitoad scanned his card on one side of the metal doors, and his assistant scanned the other. Doors of gloom slid out of the way to reveal the carcasses of friends, and ended lives of almost unrecognizable broken faces. The high walls were spotless of any fluid, yet visible scratches and fiery claw marks of security personnel were scattered around the containment. A bodyguard, which was identified to be a Corvic knight, laid across the toxic-ridden battlefield, not even able to save their own body from the specimens. Its armor and feathers were lifeless, no gleam in its eyes. There was the same violet liquid on the surface of their face. Symbionts toxins were strong enough to corrode through the toughest of steels, such as the armor of the Corvic knights. Questionably, those fiery claw marks could not have been made by the Iron Raven. The other suspect was the extremely distorted appearance of a septile. Leaves were completely stripped off of the body, and similar to the Octary, a strong bite mark resided on its damaged head. Anxiety whirled and speared through Mudsworth's head. He awkwardly made his way into the cell. What started as an ambitious project ended up killing those who enjoyed working with, and looked up to him. He was more of a dream killer for these people who cared about him. He shut his sunken, fatigued eyes closed. He had less to live for than them. If only he could take their place. A loud thud hit the floor behind him.
What's up, everyone? Are you prepared for another talk challenge? Nah, of course not. But it's time to announce it anyway. Last time I listed to you 3 key features of upcoming experiment. 1. It's a luck-based challenge. 2. There will be legendary Pokemon there. 3. There will be a triple elimination. And with all of those being said, I propose to you a game of poker. Yeah, you're not wrong. Some of you might be reminded of an episode of Total Pokemon Russia involving poker, but the game itself will not use Techolog's Hold'em rules. Instead, there will be a different set of special rules. The entire explanation of this challenge will take at least 10 minutes, but I still recommend listening in full if you want to have the better chances of surviving it. First of all 9 remaining test subjects will be playing on the same poker table. Everyone will be given 100 chips for betting purposes, plus 5 extra chips for every badge that you earned in previous challenge. The main part here, there is no vote-based elimination. Instead, the challenge ends when 3 or more test subjects run out of their chips. Likewise, to gain immunity, you need to earn 300 or more chips, and then you are guaranteed to pass. However, I cannot just allow you to go all in right from the start. Instead, the bets will slowly start to increase between rounds to give you enough time to get to a grasp of the rules. I'll explain about betting later. The poker game is played in 3 phases: exchange, betting, and showdown. During the weekend, the exchange and betting will be going at the same time. Each phase will last 24 hours, which should be enough for you to react and adapt to any kind of situation. The round starts with the exchange phase. Everyone will be given a hand of 5 randomly chosen cards. Those cards can then be used to form one of those poker hands. All 52 poker cards will be in rotation. 45 of them will be distributed between the 9 of you. The remaining 7 cards will form the exchange pool. Once, during the exchange phase, you can exchange any number of cards in your hand from those in exchange pool, in order to improve your hand, of course. The cards in exchange pool are placed in a certain order, and when you exchange 2 or more cards, you must specify the order in which they are exchanged. That is important, because everyone will be exchanging cards from the same 7-card pool. That means that the card that you previously exchanged can end up in the hand of someone else during the exchange. You can actually make a strategy based on that. You may not know the first 7 cards that are in initial exchange pool, but it is possible to predict the cards that you will draw afterwards. In case you haven't noticed it, it's all about teamwork, bluffing, and other nasty stuff. That doesn't mean that lone wolf doesn't have a good chance at winning, as long as your bluffing skills are good. As for the actual exchange action, first, you tell everyone in game chat how many cards you want to exchange. Then you tell me privately what cards you want to exchange and in which order. Remember that you can make an exchange once per round. And get this, in later rounds, players will be able to exchange cards between each other. But of course, you will not be able to exchange from draw pool after doing that, and vice versa. Following exchange is a betting phase, but you can also place bets during the exchange phase. They are usually separated because I need to provide you a feedback about the cards that you have exchanged. Players can tell others in their private chat what their cards are. It is okay to lie, I approve it. And now that you formed your winning hand, it's time to bet those chips. Everyone will pay a small ante, which will keep increasing between bets. Once you are ready, bet a certain number of chips. You can go with a starting bet, or raise to bet any number below the allowed maximum. Once someone has raised the bet, you have 3 actions: call, to call a raised bet, raise, to make an even higher bet, or fold. Keep in mind that when you fold, you will lose a number of chips that you already placed. You can also fold right from the start, in which case you will only play the minimal ante. Finally, you will not be allowed to raise during the last house of betting phase to give others some grace of time in order to react to your raise. I am trying to respect your Indonesian time zones as much as I can. Speaking about folding, if you fold at any time before the showdown phase, you will lose some chips of course, but you will not advance into showdown phase. And that also means that you won't be required to reveal your hand. Only those brave souls who call at the highest bet will advance into showdown phase. I have also made rules to deal with inactive players like Inky and Gyro, who ignored the previous challenge. If you do not make any action during exchange or betting phase, you will automatically call to match the highest placed bet. That means you will go in showdown phase, whether you want it or not. You can actually take an advantage of your inactivity if your hand is good right from the start and you don't need to exchange anything. I would like to see someone pulling that out. Finally, the bets are called. The chips are on the table. It's time for a showdown phase. As in usual poker, the strongest hand wins. The poker hands are listed an example here, from weakest to strongest. High card, 1 pair, 2 pair, 3 of a kind, straight, flush, full house, 4 of a kind, and straight flush. When the strongest hand wins, all chips that were placed on the table will go to one who built the strongest hand. But there is more to a showdown phase, and it is not called showdown for no reason. Please note the Pokemon that are printed on each of the 52 cards that I have provided for you. Those are the Pokemon that can be, unsurprisingly, used in Pokemon Showdown. But you can only use Pokemon cards that format your winning hand. For example, if you format 3 of a kind, you can use 3 Pokemon. With full house, straight or flush, you can use all 5. With just high card, only 1, the high card itself. Furthermore, the strength of a Pokemon will rise with each suit. This is the 2 of clubs, for example. And this is the king of clubs. That's where our legendary Pokemon are. See the power level difference? Then, what about the showdown itself? When the strongest hand is announced, you will have 24 hours to challenge them in Pokemon Showdown using the cards that format your own hand. If no one challenges the strongest hand, it will win by default, and all chips on the table will go straight to the winner. But if the one challenges the strongest hand, they must accept the challenge. If they are unavailable, they can ask me or someone else to arrange a battle for the challenger. Of course, you might not be able to challenge your opponent in time. So that is why it's so important getting the highest ranked hand in order to have an advantage. And keep in mind that while some hands are ranked higher in poker, they will be weaker in showdown. For example, 3 of a kind wins against 2 pair in poker, but when it comes to showdown, you will be putting 3 Pokemon against 4. Enough for a turnaround. Now 4 of a kind does not seem so prosperous as it was before. Now here comes the true gamble. If you win a showdown against the strongest hand, then you will gain all the chips on the table, unless someone else also managed to challenge you before the showdown phase ends. But if you lose the showdown phase and your hand was weaker than your opponent poker-wise, then you will lose twice the number of chips that you previously betted, and those additional chips that you lose, they will disappear from the game, reducing the number of chips in circulation in total. Furthermore, if among revealed hands, your hand ends up being the weakest, then the player who formed a strongest hand in poker can then attack you by themselves. It is bad enough just entering showdown phase, but much worse going there with a weak hand. You will be devoured. So, when in doubt, just fold. Only then you will be spared from such a risk. And of course, if everyone but one player falls, that player wins the round immediately, and they can choose not to reveal their hand if they want. The showdown phase in that case would be skipped, and everyone will move straight on to the next round. And keep in mind that rules are subject to change between rounds. And not just rules. You might see some changes on the cards themselves. When someone earns 300 or more chips during the round, they will advance to the next challenge, but 300 chips is still a lot. Those chips will be also removed from circulation, which will bring the ending quicker than you expect. For the first round, the starting ending will be 2 chips, and the maximum bet 20 chips. No one will experience the risk of losing the challenge in the first 3 rounds, but keep in mind that you can lose as much as 40 chips in the first round alone if you lose the showdown battle. And the entire long of bet will keep increasing, and I am certain that there will be subjects willing to go for maximum bet. Keep one thing in mind: as long as you have a single chip, you can keep playing. But because there are 9 players in total, the chances of winning for each one on average is 1 in 9. It all depends not only on your poker face skills, but your showdown skills as well. The challenge ends when 3 or more test subjects completely lose all their chips, and it is possible for more than 3 to lose if multiple subjects start to go all in. But without a great risk, there is no great reward. Good luck to you, test subjects. Good luck, folks, because you will always need it. Use both your luck and your wish to prevail in this hectic experiment. So, who will indulge themselves to the bottom of the abyss known as gambling? We'll find out very soon. Will you keep your mind safe after this, I wonder?